So today's story is about a guy who walks into one of Manhattan's most exclusive private dining rooms carrying a handmade birthday card and wearing a plain navy suit. His stepmother picks it up, sneers at it, and shoves it back across the table like a parking ticket. His brother-in-law, hotshot corporate lawyer Tom Ford suit, leans over and offers him a minimum wage filing job out of pity. His half-sister laughs. His dad adjusts his silk tie and tells him to stop embarrassing the family. This guy just sits there, quiet, patient, because that card isn't a card. And what's in his leather bag is about to make this the most expensive dinner his family ever sat down to. My dad's new wife mocked me at dinner. Dad told me to stop making a scene. So I stayed quiet, until she mentioned her job. Then I pulled out my phone, and watched their smile fade. My dad Frank turned 62 this year, and I want to be upfront. I had zero expectations walking in. The second the reservation confirmation hit my phone, I felt that specific low-level dread that only comes from years of knowing exactly how this family operates. Every gathering eventually turns into a blood sport, where I'm the designated punching bag. The only reason I showed up was because I'd been sitting on something for 3 months, and tonight was finally the night. I'm Nate, 34 years old. Frank married Claire when I was 19. She's 41, runs a luxury aesthetics clinic called Lumiere in Manhattan, and has spent the better part of a decade treating me like an inconvenient smudge on her otherwise perfect life. My half-sister Paige, Frank's daughter with Claire, 28 years old, grew up with brand new imported cars as birthday presents while I was told to take the bus. And then there's Victor, Paige's husband. 32, Manhattan corporate lawyer, passed the New York bar on his first try, and I promise you he has never let a single person in any room ever forget it. The way they see me: boring accountant, modest car, quiet life, nothing worth paying attention to. That's by design. They just don't know that part. The restaurant was Jeancourt, private dining room in the back, mahogany walls, crystal chandelier, the kind of place that describes their water as curated. I got there 10 minutes early and sat alone. Soft jazz bleeding through the walls from the main dining room, bread basket on the table I didn't touch. There was an abstract painting on the far wall, dark greens and blues, and I spent a few minutes just looking at it. Gave me something to focus on that wasn't my own nerves. Frank and Claire came in together. She was in a custom silk gown with diamond rings stacked on 3 fingers, engineered to make everyone in the room feel underdressed. She spotted me immediately, and her expression landed somewhere between disgust and mild annoyance, like finding a scuff on a new car. I'd placed a plain white envelope on the table in front of Frank's seat. No bow. She picked it up before he even sat down, held it between 2 fingers at arm's length. Is this supposed to be a joke, Nate? She pushed it back hard across the tablecloth, hard enough to slide past the silverware and bump against my water glass. I really thought that by 34, you'd have outgrown arts and crafts. Sharp, short laugh. The server in the corner shifted his weight. I mean, look at this. You brought a handmade card to a dinner that cost $1,000 a plate. Couldn't you stop at literally one store on the way here? I know you push papers at some boring accounting firm, but surely you can put together something for your own father. Inside that envelope was a certificate proving I'd secretly paid off the massive fraudulent debt she'd forged against my father's ancestral home. $4 million of my own money, but I didn't say anything about that. I tucked the envelope back into my bag and kept my mouth shut. Frank, sipping sparkling water, wearing a silk tie that probably cost more than most people's car payments, looked at me the way you look at a crack in your windshield. He leaned forward. She's right, Nate. I asked you to make an effort tonight. You show up in a plain suit, hand me a piece of paper. You're 34 years old. When are you going to get a real career and stop embarrassing the family image? I'm sorry the gift doesn't meet your standards. Don't act like a victim, Claire snapped, taking a slow sip of her sparkling cider. You've always been jealous of what we have. Just because you couldn't make anything of your life doesn't mean you get to drag everyone down with the energy you bring to these things. I kept my face flat. The thing about my family is, they mistake silence for weakness. They saw a guy in a modest blazer who drove a practical car and lived a quiet life. They didn't see the senior partner of one of the most aggressive private equity firms on Wall Street sitting directly across from them. They didn't know the boring accountant they were humiliating held the strings to their entire financial existence. I folded my hands. You're absolutely right, Claire. Please enjoy your evening. She rolled her eyes and dismissed me. Then Victor decided it was his turn. Victor is everything you'd expect from the phrase Manhattan corporate lawyer who knows it. Tailored suit, cufflinks, a watch he'll mention before you can ask. He leaned forward with a wide, completely empty smile. Look, Nate, I know it can be tough out there for people without a clear career path. You're pushing mid-30s. Entry-level accounting work isn't going to pay the rent forever. He let that sit. Actually, I was talking to the managing partner at my firm last week. We're expanding the records department. Data entry, filing, scanning documents. Minimum wage, maybe a little above if you show initiative. Comes with a dental plan. I can put in a good word. Give you a real shot at finally building something. Paige pressed her manicured hand over his wrist, lit up like he'd just solved world hunger. That's so generous, Victor. Seriously, Nate, just take it. It's not like you have anything better going on, and it would be so nice to finally see you buy your own clothes. She giggled. Remember when Mom used to give you my old winter coats because they still had some life left in them? You looked so funny walking around in jackets that were 2 full seasons out of style. She laughed. Claire joined in, and Frank, my father, chuckled softly, shaking his head like my existence was a harmless old joke everyone already knew the punchline to. Thank you, Victor. Good to see someone trying to help the kid out. Lord knows he needs direction. I didn't break character. Didn't explain my wardrobe choices or defend my career. I just sat there and let the laughter do what it wanted. Because what they didn't know, for the past 6 months my firm had been quietly buying controlling shares in Victor's law firm through a series of shell corporations. I'd gotten the confirmation text from my assistant on the way in, right when I walked through the parking garage. Wait, actually it was after I sat down, before the bread came out. Whatever, doesn't matter exactly when. 2 sentences. Acquisition finalized. You hold 73% of voting shares awaiting your command. I'd locked the screen and put the phone back in my bag without a word. Anyway, the evening moved forward. Claire talked about the Italian marble renovation at the clinic. Victor talked about a case he couldn't discuss in detail, but somehow still talked about in detail. I ate my food and said nothing. Hold on, let me jump in here, this is me, not Nate talking, because I need to take a second with this. Captain Courtroom just offered a minimum wage filing job to his actual boss. The man who now signs his paychecks and owns his office building just sat there quietly listening to a pitch about dental plans and showing initiative. And Claire called the card Arts and Crafts, without knowing it was addressed to a father whose house Nate had already quietly saved. These people have absolutely no idea what they're sitting across from. Buckle up, because the next part is where it gets interesting. About 40 minutes in, the head server came through carrying a thick, leather-bound private reserve menu, the kind of book they only bring out for guests who want to make a statement. He moved toward Frank, but before he could extend it, Claire snatched it out of his hands. I'll be choosing for the table tonight. She skipped past the standard sections without slowing down. Her finger dragged through the exclusive reserve offerings at the back until it stopped on the Grand Reserve tasting experience. 8 courses, private-sourced ingredients, described in the menu as a culinary event rather than a meal. She looked directly at me. 5 settings of the Grand Reserve. The server held his composure. An excellent selection, madam. I do need to let you know, the Grand Reserve is priced at $4,800 per setting. For the full table, that's $24,000 before the private dining surcharge. Shall I confirm? Confirm it, Claire said smoothly. She turned back to me. My lovely stepson Nate will be covering the full bill tonight. It's the least he can do. Paying for his father's birthday dinner is a beautiful way to prove he still respects the hierarchy of this family. 24 grand in food I didn't order, plus the private room surcharge. She just tried to drop close to $28,000 on my shoulders, fully expecting it to flatten me. I looked at Frank. 3 seconds. He adjusted his napkin. She makes a valid point. You're 34. You've never contributed anything of real substance to this family. Taking care of the check tonight would show me you're finally ready to step up. Victor crossed his arms and switched to his full courtroom voice, loud enough for the server by the wall. It's basic familial equity. Your father provided for you for 18 years. Refusing to contribute is a fundamental breach of obligation. Consider it a retroactive tax for everything this family gave you growing up. Not that Frank ever gave me anything. I put myself through college working 2 jobs, while Paige got a luxury SUV for getting a passing grade in high school. But I didn't say that. Long sip of sparkling water. Set the glass back down. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I won't be paying for meals I didn't order. I'll cover my own food and my own water. The rest is on you." Victor slammed his hand on the table and launched into a full, unhinged lecture about poverty mindsets, the social contract of the family unit, retroactive contributions. He actually said social contract out loud at a birthday dinner. Claire cut him off with a theatrical sigh, reached into her bag, produced a thick platinum credit card, and dropped it on the center of the table with a sharp metallic slap. "I'll pay, because unlike some people, I know how to generate real wealth." She lifted her chin. "In fact, I wasn't going to mention this until dessert, but my company just closed a massive funding round this morning. $15 million in venture capital from a top-tier investment firm. That's what an actual empire looks like, Nate." I felt a slight twitch at the corner of my mouth. Pressed it completely flat. $15 million. She was bragging about the exact sum my firm had wired into her account that morning through an anonymous subsidiary I'd created called Vistara Capital. She thought she'd conquered the market. She had absolutely no idea I was the one holding the strings. Frank beamed like she'd announced a Nobel Prize. Victor and Paige nodded admiringly. Claire turned her full triumphant gaze onto me. $15 million, Nate. I built a luxury empire from scratch while you're pushing papers in a cubicle. You're nothing but a financial parasite. You show up to these dinners, sit in rooms we pay for, eat the food we order, and contribute absolutely nothing to the legacy of this family." She waved over the server. He took the card and left. I already knew exactly what was about to happen. For the next few minutes, Claire held court. Investment partners who'd begged her to take their money. The marble lobby. She even leaned over and asked me if my little accounting office offered free coffee, or if we had to bring our own mugs. "You'd be surprised what goes on in my office," I said. Then the doors opened. The server came back in. Wrong posture, shoulders forward, face drained. He was holding Claire's platinum card between two fingers like it had teeth. He leaned toward her and dropped his voice. "Madam, I'm so sorry. Your card has been declined." Claire froze. Glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "I ran it twice. The transaction isn't processing. I also called merchant services to push it through manually, and the representative informed me there's a hard federal freeze on all of your assets. The account is completely locked." Hard. Federal. Freeze. The words just sat there on the table. Frank went pale. Paige covered her mouth. Victor sat up straight, every lawyer instinct activating at once. Claire erupted, shoved her chair back, stood over the server, and dropped every last trace of high society composure. "Are you calling me a criminal? I deposited $15 million into that account this morning. I am the chief executive officer of a multi-million-dollar company. Your machine is broken. I want to speak to the owner right now." I stayed seated, watching. Victor produced his corporate credit card and slid it toward the server. "Put the full balance on this," he said, with the complete authority of a man who has $2 million in liquid assets and a corner office. "Let's end this spectacle." Paige let out a loud sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God, Victor." She looked at me. "See, Nate? This is what a real man does. You should be taking notes." The server inserted the card. The machine spun. Sharp beep, red screen. He wiped the card, inserted it again. Another beep, another red. Declined. "Sir, I'm afraid your card has also been declined. Same error code. Account frozen. Contact your issuing institution." Victor's smirk vanished in real time. He shot forward in his chair. "That is a corporate account with over $2 million in liquid capital. I've run it twice, sir. The result is the same." Paige grabbed his arm. "Victor, are we broke?" "Shut up, Paige." He snatched his phone and started hammering his banking app with both thumbs. "Someone compromised the firm's firewall. I'm going to sue this bank into the Stone Age." The panic in the room had a specific texture, sour and metallic. The expensive food sat untouched on every plate while the people around it slowly came apart. Claire was frantically composing messages to investors who weren't going to respond. Paige was gripping her necklace, staring at her husband's useless card on the table. And Frank turned his eyes to me. That look. The look of a drowning man who just spotted a lifeguard. Pause. This is me jumping in, because I need a second to appreciate what just happened. 2 cards, 2 declines, back to back. The self-described financial genius, with the courtroom monologue about poverty mindsets, just watched his corporate card get declined in public at a table where 10 minutes ago he was explaining familial equity to the man who legally owns his building. That's not irony. That is a cosmic invoice delivered exactly on schedule. And Nate hasn't even reached into his bag yet. I took one more bite of sea bass. Let the chaos orbit around me for another 20 seconds. Set my fork down. Reached into my bag, bypassed my personal card entirely, found the hidden zipper compartment at the back. Cold, heavy titanium. I pulled out my black Amex Centurion card and extended it toward the server. Please run this. Full balance under the primary account for Apex Private Equity. The server stared at it before taking it, his fingers registering the weight the moment they made contact. He'd spent the last hour watching my family treat me like the broke cousin at a wedding. He glanced at the name on the card, then turned toward the machine. Right away, sir. Victor's phone dropped to the table. His eyes locked on the card in the server's hand, and I watched something move across his face. The fast, cold calculation of a man running numbers he doesn't like the answer to. As a Manhattan corporate lawyer, he tracked the major players. He knew exactly who Apex Private Equity was. Multi-billion-dollar firm, aggressive acquisitions, the kind of operation that could quietly dismantle a mid-sized law practice before the market opened on Monday. And the name on that card was Nate. The machine chimed. Green screen. Approved. The server printed the receipt, placed it in a leather folio, walked directly past Frank, ignored Victor completely, and set it next to my water glass with a slight bow. Thank you, sir. Authorization was completely successful. I'll leave you and your family to your evening. He walked out. Door clicked shut. Complete silence. Wait, Victor said, his voice about 2 octaves lower than his earlier courtroom performance. That's your card. Your name is on an Apex Centurion card. Not a question, just a flat statement. It is, I said. How does an entry-level accountant have an Apex corporate card? I'm not an entry-level accountant, I said. For the past 6 years, I've been the senior partner and lead forensic auditor at Apex Private Equity. I co-founded the firm. That card is linked to my primary operating account. Frank made a sound I can't fully describe. Part gasp, part total deflation. Claire recovered first and immediately accused me of stealing the card. Being a criminal. Entry-level clerks don't end up with black cards, she snapped. You stole it from someone at your firm. I don't steal from the company I built, I said. She opened her mouth. Nothing useful came out. The $15 million you've been celebrating tonight, I continued, keeping my voice conversational. That was me. Vistera Capital, the venture firm that wired it to your account this morning, is a subsidiary I created specifically for high-risk asset captures. When your clinic showed up flagged by federal regulators for suspicious offshore wire transfers, I took a closer look. I paused. I was the anonymous lead investor, Claire. I approved every dollar. And that federal freeze on your accounts, after your team tried to move $12 million to a Cayman Island shell company this afternoon, that was me too. She went completely still. You set me up, she whispered. You signed the contracts, I said. We handed you the rope. Victor stood up, buttoned his jacket, that deliberate gesture, and launched into a full legal performance. Tortious interference, corporate espionage, malicious financial entrapment, federal statutes. He would file an injunction. He would have my licenses revoked. He would drag me through years of brutal litigation and leave me begging for that data entry job just to cover my legal debts. I let the echo of his threats settle into the room. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. Great speech, genuinely impressive voice. It's a shame the legal comprehension doesn't match the volume. I held up the screen. You left your tablet on the table, Victor. Open it. A notification appeared on his device. An airdrop from me. His instincts told him not to open an unsolicited file from the person he'd just threatened with federal litigation. His ego won the argument in about 4 seconds. He picked up the tablet. Hold on, because Captain Courtroom is about to open a file sent to him by the person he offered a minimum wage job to earlier tonight. And I've been waiting for this moment since he said, dental plan included. Let me be clear about what's in this file. It's not just embarrassing, it's career-ending. It's the kind of document where you read the title and have to just sit down with your life choices. He's been the loudest person in this room for 3 solid hours. That is about to change. Read it out loud, Victor. I watched the screen light up his face. watched the arrogance drain from his eyes in stages, slow and methodical. "What is it?" Paige leaned toward him. "Tell us it's fake." "Read the title out loud," I said. "Let the whole table hear exactly who's going out of business tonight." Victor swallowed hard. "Notice of finalized corporate acquisition," he read, his voice completely stripped of its earlier authority. "Between Apex Private Equity and the managing partners of—" He stopped. "Say the name of your firm." He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Then he said it. Paige grabbed the edge of the table. "That's your firm. Victor, what does acquisition mean?" "It means exactly what it sounds like," I said. "As of 3 o'clock this afternoon, Apex holds 73% controlling interest in his entire legal practice. We own the office leases, the server networks, the client lists, and the employment contracts of every attorney on the payroll, including your husband." Victor dropped the tablet. It skidded into the breadbasket. "You're my boss," he breathed. "You're actually my boss." "I'm not just your boss," I said. "I decide whether you keep your corner office. I sign your paychecks. I have the authority to terminate your contract with cause, strip your equity, and leave you with nothing." He looked like someone had quietly removed every load-bearing wall in his life. Paige stood up, finger pointed. "My husband has major clients. They'll follow him anywhere. He'll start his own firm." "He signed a non-compete when he made junior partner," I said, "which Apex now enforces. If he contacts a single client on his way out, I'll sue him flat." I looked at Victor directly. "Non-compete is ironclad. Termination with cause means no corporate law practice in New York for 5 years." Victor looked at his wife. His voice had lost everything. "She's right. The clause is airtight. She'd married a man who walked into every room like he owned it. Right now, he was standing in an expensive suit, realizing the woman he'd offered a minimum wage filing job owned the building he was standing in." I looked at him, unhurried. "And I do have cause. As majority shareholder, it was my duty to audit the accounts you manage personally. Finding hidden money is what I do." He went very still. "What did you find?" "Okay, pause. This is me, because I want to mark this moment properly." Victor went from offering Nate a minimum wage data entry job with a dental plan to standing in that room realizing Nate owns his building, his client list, his health insurance, and now holds a forensic audit of his personal accounts. That is not karma. That is a controlled demolition carried out by a man who showed up tonight in a plain navy suit with a handmade birthday card. The Paige reveal coming up next? Somehow even worse than the Victor one. Stay with it. I turned my attention to Paige. She was still standing, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a woman who thought she had ground left to stand on. She didn't know the crosshairs had just shifted directly onto her. "Let's talk about the Hope Foundation for Underprivileged Youth," I said. "Paige's charity. Very noble. Galas, designer gowns, press photos with the city elite. She raises hundreds of thousands every year." Paige crossed her arms tighter. "My charity does incredible work." "You raise a lot of money," I agreed. "The problem is where it actually goes." I turned to Victor. "When I audited your private server, I found the tax shelters you drafted for your wife's charity. Dummy corporations in Delaware. Forged expense reports. You used your legal credentials to set up offshore holding accounts and funnel those charitable donations. Money meant for underprivileged youth. Directly into Paige's personal trust fund. Imported cars, designer jewelry, luxury vacations. All of it." Paige's hands flew to her mouth. She looked at Victor, waited for him to fix it. That was what he did. He fixed things. Victor kept his eyes on the floor. "Charity fraud," Frank said, barely audible, staring at his youngest daughter with an expression I'd never seen from him before. Like he didn't recognize her. "You've been stealing from a charity, Paige." "The IRS takes that very personally," I said. "They don't just fine you. They freeze assets, seize property, pursue federal charges. And since Paige is listed as the primary beneficiary of that trust, she'll be in the federal case right next to her husband." Paige let out a loud sob. Victor grabbed her arm without any tenderness in it. "Get your bag. We're leaving right now." She looked at him like he'd spoken a different language. "We can't just leave. Victor, what about my gala? What about the trust fund for the new house?" "There is no trust fund anymore," he said through his teeth. "If we stay in this room another 5 minutes, I lose my license to practice corporate law forever. Coat, now. Claire scrambled to her feet. She saw her last defense walking toward the door. Victor, you can't leave us here. My accounts are frozen. You're a brilliant lawyer. You can file the injunction, just like you said. Victor stopped, turned, looked at Claire with the expression of a man torching a bridge while standing on it. Are you actually out of your mind? You committed federal wire fraud using money from a private equity firm that now owns my career. I cannot associate with you in any legal capacity. You are radioactive. You're on your own. We're family, she shrieked. We're done, he said. He pulled Paige through the mahogany doors. They slammed shut. Just like that, the loudest people in the room were gone the second the money stopped being theoretical. That's always how it goes with people like that. Staying is for when there's something left to gain. Claire sank back into her chair. Her hands were shaking hard enough that she knocked her crystal glass off the table. It shattered on the marble floor. Neither of them moved toward it. Before I pulled out my phone, Claire made one last play. Because Claire always makes one last play. She lifted her chin. You think you've won something here. You froze my accounts and scared off Victor. But Vistara Capital has massive institutional backing. They are contractually obligated to protect my company. When I call their managing directors tomorrow, they will send an army of lawyers that will make Victor look like a traffic court attorney. Are you finished? I asked. She crossed her arms. Call off the freeze before I make a phone call that ends your career. I rested my forearms on the table. Vistara Capital is a ghost subsidiary, Claire. A shell company, wholly owned and operated by Apex Private Equity. I created it specifically for high-risk asset captures. I was your venture capital partner. I was the executive board you had video conferences with. The people who loved your business model so much. I paused. They loved it because it was one of the most transparently fraudulent structures my team had ever seen. The moment you accepted that Vistara money, you gave us full legal authorization to audit every ledger, every account, and every digital footprint attached to your clinic. We gave you the rope. You built the rest. She stared at me. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I pulled out my phone and connected to the private dining room's display screen. A massive financial flowchart appeared. Red and black lines mapping every fraudulent transaction connected to Lumiere Aesthetics. Shell companies, offshore accounts, dummy vendor invoices, all radiating outward from the clinic's name at the center. It looked less like a business structure and more like a diagram of a criminal organization. I walked them through it. The fake medical vendor invoices, hundreds of thousands of dollars paid monthly for cosmetic supplies from companies that didn't exist, registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. The money wired directly into Claire's personal offshore trust. The fabricated quarterly reports she'd been showing Frank for 3 years, side by side on screen with the actual bank statements. Ascending green graphs on the left. A catastrophic downward spiral on the right. She showed you manufactured spreadsheets, I told Frank. I showed him the forged power of attorney. Drafted by Victor. Signed with Frank's forged signature while he was on a golf trip in Scotland. The retirement fund she'd systematically liquidated. The municipal bonds cashed out. 4 decades of careful building, completely gone. And then the ancestral Hampton estate, secondary mortgage, tertiary mortgage, $4 million in equity, quietly drained and funneled into the clinic to keep the lights on, and Claire's lifestyle running. Frank's phone slipped out of his hands, trying to check his banking app. He grabbed it back, navigated from account to account, looked for something, anything, that wasn't zero. There wasn't one. He was 62 years old. His entire financial life was gone. With the mortgages Claire had secretly taken on the estate, his net worth wasn't just zero. It was deeply, irreversibly negative. He let the phone slide off his fingers again, pressed both hands over his face. She was going to leave you holding it, I said. The $15 million from Vistara was her golden parachute. Move $12 million offshore disguised as a bulk equipment purchase, wait a few months, declare bankruptcy for the clinic, cite market conditions. And since you're listed as the primary guarantor on her commercial lease, Frank, the creditors would have come directly after you. She'd have been in the Caribbean while you filed for bankruptcy at 62. Frank lowered his hands. He looked at Claire. Not with anger at first, just with the hollow disbelief of a man who's had his entire world explained to him in the worst possible terms. "You were going to destroy me," he said, "and leave." Claire reached for him, sobbing. He shoved her hand away, hard. "You stole my life," he said, louder. "You forged my name, and you stole my life. Hold on. Just for a second." The guy who walked into this dinner with a handmade card and a plain navy suit. The one his dad told to stop embarrassing the family before he'd said 5 words. Just systematically dismantled every single person at that table using nothing but documentation and patience. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't defend himself once when they laughed at his clothes. He just waited. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the loudest one. It's the quiet one who's been running the math the entire time. One move left. I stood quietly at the end of the table and let Frank absorb it. He'd chosen Claire and Paige over me for 34 years. Defended them, funded them, laughed along when they treated me like a punchline. And the second the money stopped, the second the illusion cracked, they were gone without a second thought. No loyalty, no hesitation. I reached into my bag one final time. The white envelope, the one Claire had sneered at 2 hours ago. The handmade birthday card she'd shoved back across the table before I'd said hello. Not a card. A thick stack of official documents. Gold seal of the county clerk at the top. Satisfaction of mortgage. Beneath it, the original deed to the Hampton estate. Free and clear. When my forensic team first uncovered the forged mortgages Claire had taken against the estate, I had 2 options. Let the bank foreclose and walk away, or use my own capital to buy out the debt. On paper, the rational move was obvious. Poisoned asset, encumbered by forgery and fraud. No business case for preserving it. But I kept thinking about the library in that house. The room I used to disappear into as a kid, while Frank hosted dinner parties downstairs. Conversations I wasn't included in. Guests I was never introduced to. I remembered sitting on the floor in that library, listening to the sounds of the party coming up through the floorboards. 3 generations in our family. It didn't deserve what was happening to it, so I'd wired the $4 million. Cleared every mortgage. The deed was clean. I laid it on the table in front of Frank. He saw the county seal and the words, "Satisfaction of mortgage." And something happened in his face I'd genuinely never seen from him. Real relief. Both hands went for the documents immediately. "Nate," his voice was shaking. "You saved the house. You actually paid it off." He was crying before he finished the sentence, which I'd also never seen. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I was blind. I was stupid. I let them treat you like garbage for 34 years. I let him get about 4 sentences in. Then I picked the documents back up. The relief collapsed in real time. A new kind of fear moved across his face, smaller and more specific, with his name on it. "I brought that here to give you," I said. "Before I sat down tonight, before any of this, I was going to hand you back your house and offer you a fresh start. That was what was in the envelope. Not a card. A deed." I looked at him directly. "And then I sat at this table. I watched you nod along while Claire called me a parasite. I heard you tell me to stop embarrassing the family. I watched you demand that I pay $28,000 to prove my worth to people who've never assigned any worth to me at all." His hands were shaking openly. "A gift requires a recipient worth giving it to," I said. "Tonight, you showed me exactly who you are." "No," he said, pushing himself up from the table. "Nate, please, I'm begging you. You can't let me lose everything at 62. I'm your father. Give me a loan. I'll pay you back. Please." I'd thought about this moment for years, wondered what I'd actually feel when it came. Not much, as it turned out. I held the deed with both hands and ripped it straight down the middle. The heavy parchment tore cleanly, the gold seal splitting right with it. Folded the halves, ripped again. Kept going until the satisfaction of mortgage and the $4 million fresh start were nothing but a handful of jagged pieces. I opened my palms over Frank's dinner plate. The pieces drifted down onto the white porcelain. He stared at them. "Stop making a scene, Frank," I said, keeping my voice completely flat. "You're embarrassing the family." He recognized those words. His own words, from barely 2 hours ago, used to dismiss me before I'd said anything at all. The recognition hit his face like something physical. That's when the lights came through the frosted windows. Blue. Red, rhythmic, and steady. Then footsteps on the marble outside. The specific weight and deliberate pace of people who walk with federal authority. The mahogany doors opened hard. 5 agents moved into the private dining room with the quiet efficiency of people who've done this in nicer places and will do it again tomorrow. Dark suits. Navy windbreakers with bold yellow letters. FBI. IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I hold a federally licensed forensic audit certification. It comes with mandatory reporting obligations. When you uncover wire fraud, bank fraud, offshore tax evasion, and forged financial instruments, you can't keep it as a family secret. You package the evidence and send it to the appropriate people. That afternoon, I'd sent the encrypted file. Every forged document, every fake invoice, every fraudulent tax return, the offshore account trail, the mortgage forgery timeline, directly to the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division and the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit. All I had to do was show up for dinner and wait. The lead agent moved straight toward Claire. "Madam, I'm Special Agent Davis with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're executing a federal arrest warrant for multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion. Please turn around." She screamed, grabbed the tablecloth, scrambled toward Frank. "Richard, tell them it's a mistake. Call Victor. We have money." Frank didn't move, didn't turn his head. He sat staring at the torn pieces of the deed on his plate. 2 agents took Claire by the arms and lifted her to her feet. She thrashed, her gown twisted, her hair came loose. The image she'd spent years and millions constructing, the untouchable CEO, the mogul, the empire, gone in about 30 seconds in the back room of a Manhattan restaurant. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." They walked her toward the door. She twisted back and found my eyes one last time. "Nate, please tell them to stop. Take the clinic. Take the car. Take all of it. I'm sorry. Just tell them to let me go." "That's out of my hands now," I said. "The federal government doesn't negotiate." The doors swung shut. Her voice faded down the hallway, past all the Manhattan elite she'd spent years desperately trying to impress. They were watching now. The room went completely silent. I picked up my bag. I stopped by the head server near the entrance before leaving. He looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in 3 hours. I handed him a thick envelope, $5,000 in cash I'd brought specifically for this evening, knowing my family would cause a scene. "Divide this evenly among the staff. I'm sorry about the disruption. They won't be back." He bowed slightly, hands still shaking. I walked through the main dining room. Everyone quiet, forks down, watching. The hedge fund managers, the socialites, the old money families, all of them watching me. The guy in the plain navy suit walk through the middle of the wreckage completely unbothered. I kept my eyes forward, pushed through the front door. Cool Manhattan air, clean and quiet. A black SUV was already pulling to the curb. My driver, Ray, had the rear door open before I reached it. I got in. The door shut. The city went quiet. I leaned my head back against the headrest and let out a long exhale. Final update. Claire was formally charged with federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion. The Cayman Island accounts were traced and frozen. Lumiere Aesthetics was seized by federal receivers pending full asset liquidation. Her personal items, the jewelry, the vehicles, the clinic contents, were inventoried as corporate assets under the acquisition clause she'd signed without reading carefully enough. Victor resigned from the firm 4 business days later. I sent him a written performance review first, as a matter of protocol. The non-compete is being strictly enforced. He hasn't attempted to contact any firm clients. Paige is cooperating with the IRS investigation in exchange for reduced personal exposure. Whether that helps her, I genuinely don't know. I stopped following her news around the same time I deleted her from my phone. Frank lost the Hampton estate. The bank called the commercial loans attached to Claire's clinic guarantorship, and with the accounts frozen, there was nothing to cover them. Last I heard through a cousin, he's in a smaller apartment now. He hasn't called. I haven't called. The deed is in pieces, somewhere in a Joncourt kitchen trash bag, probably. I spent some time after that night wondering whether I'd regret tearing it up. I thought I might. I don't. There's a version of this story where I hand him that deed, and it actually changes something. Where he becomes the father I spent 34 years quietly waiting for. I used to think about that version a lot. I don't really anymore. What I did was enough. What I built was enough. If you've ever had to sit at the wrong end of a table and stay quiet while someone measured your worth against their own shallow standards, you know exactly why I didn't say a single word all night. The best revenge isn't loud, it's documented. So, if you'd been sitting in that seat, what would you have done with that deed? Drop it in the comments. Look, Nate didn't show up to that dinner angry. He showed up prepared. There's a massive difference. Angry gets you a screaming match and a story people forget by Monday. Prepared gets you a federal arrest warrant and a receipt. They called his handmade card arts and crafts, offered him minimum wage filing with a dental plan, and told him to stop embarrassing the family. He sat quietly through all of it because he didn't need their validation to keep building. The real flex isn't the black card or the firm acquisition. It's the patience. Knowing what you're worth and not needing a single person at that table to confirm it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done with that deed? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit the button. You don't want to miss what's next.